Hi,
Awesome.
everyone. Welcome to another Creative Confidence talk. I'm here with the lovely Kieron Lewis, freelance designer, Adobe Live host, and educational speaker. Hi, Kieron.
Hello, Teresa. How you doing? You good?
I, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for doing
Nice.
this.
My
Um,
pleasure. My pleasure.
can you, I mean, I mentioned a few things that you do up there, but I know that you do way more. And
Mm.
I'm sure that everyone would be really interested to hear how you got to where you are and, kind of tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. That was quite an introduction. I guess it's when you list it like that, you kind of break it down and think, oh yeah, I do a fair bit of stuff. So to answer your question, I'm a freelance graphic designer. I actually went freelance 2 years ago. So this would be my second year. Before that, I sort of worked at a few ad agencies and editorial agencies. And then on the back of that, as well as working at publishers, which is what I do for my freelance job. I also do a hosting for Adobe Live as well, which is really cool. So I get a chance to meet different creatives all over the world, and then to host them whilst they're designing and seeing their sort of design methodology and design process. And then yeah, parallel to that, I also like to, when there's time, of course, I always like to give talks at schools as well. So I'm quite active on that front, and I think that's probably just stemmed off from where I kind of grew up, growing up in South London, and then going to different parts of different areas of London in terms of experiences, and then trying to share my experiences, whether it's design or whether it's just kind of growing up experiences to the younger generation, as it were. So that's kind of what I do and what I wake up for in the mornings. Yeah.
Oh, that's so brilliant. And yeah, you are so active, and it's anyone who follows you can see how much you do, and yeah, that you actually have like that thing about giving back as well, which is really cool and so
Mm.
so important. What made you go freelance, and how does creative confidence play a part on it sometimes, or tell us a bit,
Mm.
bit about it.
Yeah, I mean, I it's weird. I graduated from uni 10 plus years ago. Feels like well, it was a long time ago. And I generally, even thinking back to when I graduated, I've always wanted to go into freelance. I think it was that ability of the flexibility, the freedom, being selective with clients you work with, but um, I always hit a wall in a sense where I overthink a lot of things. Just how I am, and I think most of the creatives are. We overthink things,
Mm.
and I think every time I felt
Yeah.
like, okay, this is the year to go freelance, there was always something can hold me back. Whether it was the financial, you're gonna be, financially afloat and all these elements of it. Um, and weirdly enough, sometimes it almost takes something bad to happen to realize, good things are kind of there, if that makes sense. So in a sense where I went freelance at the beginning of the pandemic, which seems mental to
Mm.
think that before pandemic was never a thing. Surely that's the time you go
Yeah.
freelance with ability in the world. But yeah, I think for me it was kind of a sink or swim situation, which I think I needed that um, almost pressure to then realize, okay, you can make it work. And then my wife and I, we spoke it through financially, all these kind of lifestyle things. Can we be afloat
Mm.
financially? And yeah, I made it happen about 2 years ago, and then since then, it's been quite organic with some of the clients that I work with, and I guess word of mouth, and especially publishing world is quite a small. It's big, but it's also quite a small space as well. So then word of mouth plays a big role, and yeah, that's kind of led me to the clients that I kind of work with today.
Yeah, and you do loads, you mentioned publishing and editorial. Like what really did you were you always into print? Were you always like into it? Like can you think of like any kind of books or things that inspired you when you were growing up?
Mm. Yeah, it's funny. I'm still growing up. I mean, it's my birthday tomorrow. Actually, that's how much I'm growing up.
Oh,
I strategically put out there, just like the books
yeah,
behind me.
yeah.
Just to see. I mean, print is my thing. I love editorial, and like even when I think back to when I was at uni, myself and a few friends of ours, we worked on sort of self-directed projects together and zines, and like we kind of, I think it's the idea of working on projects because you want to do it rather than being told to do it. That was always something of me, and but I've always been quite curious, and I think. I don't want to. How's that come across when I say it? Not the idea of I like to do projects because I have the ownership of doing it rather than being sometimes told. Obviously, with briefing clients, you get going to get told what to do. But I think with the freelance element, there's a sense of there's trust in you. So when I have clients approaching me, there's
Mm.
always a sense of you know, hopefully this guy knows what he's doing. Let's kind of obviously there's guidelines and there's briefs, but I think I resonate more towards that type of work than being in a full-time place, which I have been in many full-time places, and that's been cool. But I think that space for freelance has always been me, and editorial in particular. Like I love print. I love the tactile things, like things in hand. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
it's nice to just have things in hand. So yeah, and that
yeah,
print of stuff
yeah,
as well is quite cool.
yeah, yeah. I like the
Mm.
smell as well of books and stuff as well. It's just
That
something.
fresh smell, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's just yeah, I can't get used to well, I've never had a Kindle, but yeah, I think it's not for me really. I just
Yeah.
so yeah, I totally get you. Um,
Mm.
how would you say like were you always creative? When did you find out that you when did you realize that you were creative? Was there like a moment where you were like, oh, actually, this is what I'm gonna do
Mm.
for a living?
Going back to like school days, I'm talking like even before college. So what, 12-year-old Kieran, I guess. I was always into like art in school. I love art and I loved English.
Mm,
Which were, the idea of writing and
mm,
reading, I enjoyed, and then the elements of designing and being creative. So I guess at that young age, I knew I wanted to maybe do something in that space. I just didn't know what the technical term would be. I had technology class, so I had graphic design as a class, and that was cool. I really enjoyed that, and I was massively into like comic books, like drawing comic books and like drawing things, and that kind of it's weird because I watch a lot of like listen to a lot of podcasts and watch a lot of design documentaries, and there's always it stems sometimes from like drawing stuff when you're a kid, and I think that's kind of stayed in me as
yeah,
well, like Simpson characters and like sketching in my book and being told off in class because I would draw my school books. Do you know what I mean? Like cartoon characters.
yeah,
Yeah, that I guess that was kind of my thing in knowing that if I can make a career out of this, whether it's something to do with print or designing or even writing and reading, or speaking to people, maybe that could be a role which kind of leads into the Adobe as well, which is weird because
mm,
before being graphic designer, I actually wanted to be a journalist, weirdly enough, before we actually loved the idea of talking to people and like
yeah,
traveling and people, which weirdly enough has led me into the Adobe space, which again, you can't make that up if you try. It's kind of organically happened as it were. So to answer your question, it's probably
yeah,
definitely back to like 12-year-old me, school days. Definitely, yeah.
yeah. And when do you realize that you had to kind of like build up creative confidence, or was that something that came naturally? Did you ever have any
Mm.
setbacks, any kind of situations where you were like, oh, you know, do I keep on going, or this is
Mm.
not going, I don't know. I'm just thinking, lots of people,
Yeah, of
lots of
course.
creative people,
Mm.
sometimes have that, and it's just good to share a bit of tips to dealing with setbacks and
Of course. Yeah, for me, I mean, the biggest one that comes to mind straight away is so I was made redundant. I can't remember how many
mm,
years ago it was now actually, and probably been like 3 years, 4 years before freelance. And I remember it was for various reasons why I was very redundant. And I absolutely adored that job because that was the one job at various places where it was heavily editorial. So that was kind
mm,
of my thing. Like obviously I love editorial, which is what I do now. But everywhere I worked at previously was heavily advertising. So we have occasional editorial projects, but not always. And this was the one place where I had it. And then obviously I was made redundant. So it was almost like out of my hands that I have to leave. And it was a weird feeling. And I think
mm,
looking back then, it was rabbit, it was a horrible feeling. But I remember thinking to myself, well, I've got to make it work. Like I still want to be active, in terms of because I still at the time I was living with my parents, so there wasn't much of a like for example now I've got a mortgage and it wasn't as deep
mm,
as it is now. But at the time I
mm,
was at home, so financially I could survive because being parents. And I remember being active in a sense where I was handing out, looking for jobs and interviews and doing other stuff, but I was still giving talks at schools. Like I was doing this stuff on the side or doing side
mm,
projects, and I kind of felt the easy, not the easy thing, but perhaps another alternative universe would have been just to heavily just focus on finding a job and then leave the sort of side hustles or
yeah,
the talks at schools, which to be totally transparent, it doesn't pay the great, but it's not about the pay. It's more the idea of speaking and sharing. So there's elements of still keeping, I guess, your values intact, parallel to
mm,
still trying to make a living, and do work and find those interviews. That kind of kept me going. And then yeah, I mean, kind of a few years after that, I found myself another job, and then burning on my CV is very sporadic, which is one thing I always
mm,
say. Like, if it's the idea of don't stay at one job for too long, or the idea of thinking, should I leave when I want to leave? I always kind of worried about that. And then when I look back to my CV, I won't say the number, but there's definitely a few places that I've been, which I think I kind of needed that idea of knowing
Yeah.
where is it best to go. And then yeah, obviously gone freelance, and it's been good, touch wood, so far. So yeah, but I generally believe where I'm at now as a result of the setbacks that happened
Mm.
previously, and then understanding, okay, you know what, well, no, I'm not the only person in the creative industry to be made redundant, and kind of how do they deal with it. And also picking the brains of friends who actually were in a similar situation. So I remember, I'm going two off piece now. Before going freelance, I picked the brains of my friends who were freelancers before. So finding out, you know,
Mm-hmm.
do they have accountants? How do they find clients? All these elements, because I thought, well, it's one thing to go on blogs and read about it, but if I tap into my actual friends who I know, they're not going to lie to me. Do you know what I mean? There's already transparency. So
Yeah.
I had a few mates who were just very honest and like, it's good some days, sometimes it's shit, but you make it work. And then yeah, that helped a lot in terms of where I'm at now, I'd say. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it's really good to kind of like get the support of your network as well when you're thinking
Mm,
of doing something like that, isn't it? It's just so important to build that network and have that kind of like safe space where you can ask these questions and get like realistic
mm,
views, isn't it, of what's actually happening. Um
100%, 100%.
you do something obviously, you know, with the school speaking, you know, the you going around the schools and speaking to students, to really young people. What's like do they ever ask you like what's the best advice you got given? And I was
Yeah, do you
just
know what?
thinking,
Yeah. Kids are savage, and it's weird. I enjoy the pressure of it. Like that makes sense. Like I feel
mm,
the questions you get asked, because it ranges from schools to universities as well. So I give talks at unis. So one that I think it was like a
oh yeah,
few months back, where in the same week I gave a talk at a uni. So talking to 23, 24 year olds, and then the day previously, 2 days before, talking to 13-year olds. And it's weird because you
mm,
tailor you know what I mean? It's so vast in terms of the kind of questions they
yeah,
would ask. And some questions where it's like, I think one of them asked me like, "Do you get enough sleep?" Like that was when one of the students asked me, "Do I get enough sleep?" And I thought that's kind of related to being a freelancer and working for yourself. I mean, it's just kind of
yeah,
valid in a way. So to answer your question, like, yeah, like I think for me, I absolutely love, you know, those elements of those questions and sort of tips and questions I get given. I think it's the idea of being comfortable in your skin. I think
mm,
I always say it's one thing to be okay, the skill set of being a designer and knowing the programs and all the Adobe suite. That's amazing. That's important. But the people skills is so valid.
mm,
And I think I mean, and I'm sure you're probably the same. Like a lot of people were, and I've done before, where you work in places where there's absolute I don't know what language I could use to say it, but not very nice people sometimes, right? In terms of where you operate.
yeah,
And I think when you're freelance, it's different because you can be selective who you work with, but you still need to have that elements of you're meeting new people. So how do you you know, articulate what you want to try and get across, and being, you know, listening more, and there's elements of being, you know, if someone's not getting it or clients aren't understanding what you're trying to put forward, that patience as
mm,
well. So I push that
yeah,
quite heavily in my talks as well, rather than just focusing on the amazing final design I've made. It's more that is part of it, but the process leading up to it and that relationship you build with a client is so important, and you have to nurture it. And
mm,
you know that's not just being freelance. That's just freelance full time, and probably just in as a human being, right? Um, so yeah,
yeah. 100%. Yeah, that's such good advice as well, isn't it? It is all
mm,
about the relationships and you know the trust that people put on you
mm,
and that you put on each other and that you know that really kind of leads the way because yeah, as you this is not art for the art's sake. This is, you know,
of
visual
course, yeah.
communication.
Definitely. And you know, laughter is
Yeah.
important as well. I always say in my talk, if we have a new client and we have a bit of a laughter in between, it just
Yeah.
sweetens the deal, because I feel like we've broken the barrier of who's this guy, and trying to suss out who, you know what I mean? It's obviously that's important, but I
Yeah.
feel like there's an element of you become more human, and it feels a bit more like, okay, we've put everything on the table, what we're about, you know, we've
Yeah.
spoken about finance, everything else, and it's just now we can be honest with one another. That makes the process so much more streamlined, I find. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's also part of being authentic as well, isn't it? I mean, knowing you personally, yeah, you are really funny
Yeah.
as well, very really personable and stuff. So yeah, it's not.
Oh, Teresa, I'll
It
pay
is
you for that
just.
later.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's all about being authentic as well, isn't it? It's like
Mm.
you can't not because yeah, sometimes I'll have like a meeting with a client and I'll be like, oh my God, I shouldn't have said that. Like, what are they gonna
Yeah.
think of me and stuff? And actually, like
Yeah.
that is, because I'm, a bit weird sometimes. They'll just be like,
Weird is good.
okay,
I love
whatever.
it.
It's just, but
Yeah.
it's like you just have to be who you are and be comfortable with it. But
Mm.
yeah, what motivates you to keep on going on those days when you're having
Mm.
setbacks?
Mm.
What keeps
What
you?
keeps me going? Do you know what the one thing I've learned in my whole 2 years of freelance, because like it's a whole archive of many years, I'm still very fresh in this space. I think the
Mm,
one thing I've learned more is when I'm having a creative block or I'm having just a really rubbish day where just you're trying your
mm,
best to get stuff done, but it's just not working. I think I've had to step away from the computer and I've gone for a walk or you know, I like to game, so I'm playing FIFA. I'm just doing something that's not work, just for like half an hour, an hour, having a nap or siesta, which I love siestas.
yeah.
And I feel like when I just switch my brain off for not focusing heavily on trying to do something on something separate, when I come back,
Mm,
I'm a little bit more refreshed, and sometimes that helps. Or I do a lot of writing in terms of like notes. Like I live by stickies on the computer, or I have my Moleskine books, and I'm writing to-do list. But actually, I do actually do my to-do list rather than just writing them down. But I do find
oh
if I've got
yeah.
so much stuff I need to do, just try and still be proactive, even if the day doesn't feel like you are. Does that make sense? So like I'll wake up one
Mm,
day and I'm like, okay, I've got how many projects to work on during this day. But if it doesn't come through that well, or I just don't feel like it's not working in terms of the productivity of it, then I kind of find I'll do something that's still productive, even if it's not exactly those
mm,
projects. So maybe it's leading up to it, or
yeah.
for example, I'm gathering my folders and I'm getting ready for when my assets come through. Like I'm still doing something that is leading up to it,
Yeah.
even if it's see that project. Does that make sense? I don't know if that's I'm
Yeah, yeah,
rambling on,
yeah.
but
But that
yeah.
it makes total sense. Yeah. I mean, I'm the
Mm,
same. I'll do like organizing or something that's like, yeah, as
mm,
you said, like it's really helpful for the process, but it doesn't have the creative pressure sometimes because, isn't it? It's like sometimes you just
exactly.
the engine doesn't start and you just have to
Doesn't
go, yeah, okay. I
exactly.
I
Seriously, that's
I
yeah.
respect it. But
Exactly.
yeah, no, I get it. Like, and funny what you mentioned earlier, because like I've had like a couple of like productivity workshops that I attended, and one thing
Mm,
that they say is that doing a brain dump is really helpful when you're having like a block of anything. So you were
mm,
saying like just like writing down the stuff that you
mm.
have to do, the to-do list, all that stuff, but just kind of it doesn't feel productive at the time, but it's so good for your brain apparently.
Totally. No, I get that. I
Yeah.
get that. And music helps as well. Like I mean,
Mm.
I won't name out the agency, of course not. But I remember being in one in particular where they didn't allow music, and I can't even
Uh,
like in the office. And I mean, we're creative, right? Everyone has different ways of how they get in the zone.
mm.
But I need a strong Spotify playlist or Radio
Yeah.
Six music. Do you know what I mean? You got to be. And then for me, I'm locked in. I'm locked in.
Yeah.
Once you got a good
Yeah.
playlist.
Yeah. Yeah. You need the nice beats, isn't it, to kind
Of
of
course,
get it going.
of course, of course.
Um, so just like as like a kind of like to round things up,
Mm.
creative confidence, how would you say that helps in people's success?
Creative confidence. Well, for one, I feel like you understand yourself a lot better. So before you can project to the world how confident you are, and that could come across through the work you produce or how you present yourself on social media or anything like that. It starts from within, and I don't mean to get too weird about it, but I think when you know in yourself, and that's not something someone can tell you. You need to know in yourself how you feel
Mm,
and whether you feel comfortable with a project or whether you feel comfortable with how someone's spoken to you in the workplace. And do you know what I mean? It's for me, when you're comfortable in yourself, you produce better work. And that's not even just being a creative, that's just across the whole board.
mm,
Without getting too deep into it, again, a lot of my work I touch on race and the community and editorial. And that's another reason why I give talks at schools, because when I was growing up, there wasn't many people that looked like myself giving these talks. So it's
Yeah.
important I'm able to go back and present that to people that feel like it can be realistic, and then they feel
Mm.
comfortable in their skin, regardless of color, gender, sex. When they feel comfortable in
Yeah.
their body, their skin, then they feel a bit of no fear, especially when it comes to like questioning things and challenging. And I always say, just to kind of round up what I want to say, like I always say, when you're a freelancer, the sweet spot is when you have a client, but you can challenge them in a way that
Yeah.
they trust in what you're saying, but it's not. You don't feel like, oh shit, why did I say that's gonna freak them out? And you know what I mean? It's they respect
Mm.
what you're saying for the sheer fact that you both want to get to the best deliverable possible. So
Mm.
that's the kind of relationship I like to build with a client, where you feel like you can challenge, they understand, and vice versa. They challenge you about
Mm.
your creativity and why you've done certain things. So I try to get these little, I guess, nuggets of information when I give talks at schools, and I think the creative confidence builds into that heavily, because then when you're confident, you're perhaps the most creative you can be and the best you can be as well. So it all kind of works in hand. If that answers your question. Yeah.
I love that. No, that really does. And I really do love that what you said about having no fear, because
Mm,
it is fear that stops many, many people from pursuing, creative anything, it's not even the
mm,
career where a hobby or anything that they want to
mm,
do. So yeah, it's so important that, it's really, really well put.
mm. But just to clear, I mean, just to
Um,
clear, like, by the way, like, fear is good as well to have. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like if you have no fear, you're not nervous, you're not kind of not human. Do you know what I mean? Like I always
yeah.
say when I do like the Adobe Live, like I am nervous every single time they do the three,
Oh
two, one
yeah.
count before you go. But then I think it's the adrenaline that you feel and that you kind of ride on that wave, and that's enough to kind of get you by. So nerves is something that if you don't have nerves, then yeah, you're not human basically. But I think it's important to still have the elements of it. Kind of keeps you grounded, because do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
you kind of don't want to get things wrong, and it keeps you humble as well at the same time. So like being
Yeah.
super confident is how one people can work. But I think that balance of
Yeah.
confidence and being grounded is important. Yeah.
Yeah. I think confidence and arrogance are two very different things. Yeah. And it's,
So that's
yeah.
a different podcast for
Yeah.
another day. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
that completely different. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, but couldn't agree more. And yeah, it is super important as well to stay humble and like keep on
Mm.
learning, but yeah, but keep on playing as well, isn't it? With what we
Of
do,
course,
isn't it? Because
100%.
if you're not having fun, if you're not feeling fulfilled, then why are you doing it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's not for us. We're in a different line of work. If we want to, we've got to have fun and enjoy it while you do it, for sure.
Exactly, exactly. Oh, Kieron, thank you so much. I really loved talking to you, and
My pleasure.
I'm
Good
so
one.
happy that you accepted to do this.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you so so much, and yeah, see you very soon. And
In
thank
the
you for
real world,
everyone
right?
who watched this. Yeah, exactly. IRL.
For sure. And yeah,
Um,
thank you for everyone tuning in, for sure.